sleeping here alone. You know I dream in color and do the things I want. You think you got the best of me, think you had the last laugh, but you think that everything good is gone. Think you left me broken down, think that I'd come running back. Baby, you don't know me, but you're dead wrong. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. What doesn't kill you makes a fighter. Footsteps even lighter. Doesn't mean I'm over, 'cause you're gone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, stronger. Just me, myself, and I. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. You heard that I was starting over with someone new. They told you I was moving on over you. Didn't think that I'd come back swinging. You tried to break me, but you see what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. What doesn't kill you makes a fighter. Footsteps even lighter. Doesn't mean I'm over, because you're gone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, stronger. Just me, myself, and I. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. Thanks to you, I got a new thing started. Thanks to you, I'm not so broken hearted. Thanks to you, I'm finally thinking about me. You know, in the end, the day you left was just my beginning. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. What doesn't kill you makes a fighter. Footsteps even lighter. Doesn't mean I'm over, 'cause you're gone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. What doesn't kill you makes a fighter. Footsteps even lighter. Doesn't mean I'm over, because you're gone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, stronger. Just me, myself, and I. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. When I'm alone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Haden. I am pastor at Kindred UMC.
Hi, I'm Courtney, and I'm the director of community engagement at Kindred UMC.
You said all of that without closing your lips once.
Wow.
Love that for me.
And I'm Preston, and that's hard. That's really hard. And no
No what?
is my phrase this year.
No is your
That's my-
Oh, your word of the year?
It's my no solution.
No
Is there a resolution? No. Just
My word of the year is... Take a guess.
Houseplants.
It's
No.
not a word. I
No.
don't know. Is it a phrase?
It's a word.
Epidemiology.
Kind of the opposite of yours.
It's a great word.
My word of the year is alignment.
Oncology. Oh. Okay.
Alignment. I want to lean into my curiosity and make decisions for myself and do things on my own.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just didn't connect any of the dots that you just said with the word you said earlier.
He wasn't aligned.
Alignment?
Yeah.
Like leaning into my own curiosity, like alignment with oneself. Like
cosmetology.
Okay.
So it's not a real word.
okay, well, that's my word.
I want to
Take it or
understand,
leave it.
but I feel like it's going to be a bigger conversation, and we have things to talk about. Well, this is the first one that we're recording in the new year. It's not the first one released in the new year, but it's the first one we're recording in the new year.
It's true.
And so here we all are in a brand new world, 2021. Things don't feel different to me.
We're weird. People are weird.
Why is your word no?
Because it's better than yes sometimes. Because I do too much and I need to relay it to myself. And if it's just
There's power in no.
There's power
I mean, that's true.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I like that.
I also forgot to say mine's about leaning into how I really feel,
You guys already had a podcast
which
about this.
also kind of lines up with alignment.
Okay. I think I understand where you're coming from.
What's your word of the year?
I've literally not given it a single thought.
Oh, okay.
I've never done a word of the year ever. True. That's always my word of the year. How about that? True.
True. Sincerity.
True is, well, not just sincerity. True. Because facts also matter. And I've been watching Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew has a special relationship with Christina Pajinski from Your Mom's House, and they are starting the rational revolution, and I'm into it in a big, big way. I'm like into it. Like, hey, why don't we use evidence? When we're making decisions that affect, I don't know, the world, why don't we use evidence? And then not just do whatever we feel like. Like, let's use evidence. So it's not just sincerity, it's true. Like, what is true? So yeah, mine'll be true. We're on our second week of Stupid Things Christians Say, aka Mythbusters, aka Stupid Shit We All Say, aka it's gone through several iterations, and this is the first time that I'm allowed to decide for sure exactly what it, and I decide it's Stupid Things Christians Say. Last week we talked about the prosperity gospel. Are there any loose threads to tie up?
No, not for me.
Let it be known that we got Preston as a Christmas gift the Joel Osteen Inspiration Cube.
And he didn't bring.
I didn't. It will be here next time.
It's wonderful. We should start every episode with
the Joelism.
With the Joelism.
Only you can prosper as long as I can as well.
Okay. All right. So let's get into the topic this week. So this is kind of a strange pairing between topic and scripture. Mm-hmm. So let me just acknowledge that. So what I want to talk about is the phrase, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. Guys, everything happens for a reason, which is technically true. Everything does happen. There's a cause behind everything. Like, it's technically true. But that's not what people mean when they say it. And here's an example. So when I was going through my ordination process, and you have to go before these boards, you have to write 90 pages of, you have to basically write a dissertation, and they have to read it, and then they call you in, and then you have to pay to go for psychological, you have to get tested, you have to get all this stuff. And then they sit you down at this table where there's it's like a square arrangement of the 8-foot long tables, and there's a bunch of people around them, and then there's one seat down in the middle, and that's empty because that's where you sit. And so you sit there, and then they just kind of, usually they're nice, and they're actually working really hard to improve the process. But back when I first started, it was a little bit of intentionally a grilling. And so I went through mine, they grilled me a little bit, but ultimately things went fine. And I went through and yada, yada, yada. There was another friend of mine who I won't mention because this story can be a little dicey. But he's a good friend of mine. I've known him literally since we were teenagers. So know this guy pretty well and have worked with him in church settings, have not always exactly gotten along with him, but I've always gotten along with him. Like, we've had our moments where we butt heads because we're both kind of that way. But I've never it's never been a problem. So this guy, he realized that he was going to you have to, at that point you had to, now it's all online, but back then you had to mail in your paperwork. So it's literally like 90 pages. It's like a stack of documents you have to mail in. And he was like a poor, starving seminary college kid like the rest of us. And it was going to be like, oh crap, I have to overnight this to make sure it's going to get there in time. And so he called up and talked to whoever was the administrator or whatever, and was like, hey, listen, I've got this all scanned in. It's in digital format. Could you do me a huge favor and print this out, please? And she said, no. And he was like, how come? Like, what? And she's like, that's not what the rules are. And he was like, well, yeah, it's not that I can't. I can just overnight it, but I'm just, save me $80 here, please. And she was like, no. He's like, what? And they went round and round. He's like, do you have a printer? She's like, yeah. Does it work? Yeah. What? Then I don't understand what's going on here. And it got heated. And then he eventually was like, I'm sorry. I will just overnight it. He just bit down on the bullet, and he's like, all right. He paid $80 or whatever to overnight it. They got it. He goes into that same room. Oh no. Sits down in the chair. The first thing they ask him is, tell us about this interaction with our administration. And he was like, what? Caught off guard, because he in his mind, he had apologized and made amends and moved on and I'm so sorry, stressful time, let me, and they were like, tell us about this interaction. And so that he kind of tried his best to explain it. They grilled him even more, and eventually it became clear that they basically told him no. Normally when they tell someone no, they say not at this time, which means you need to do these, what they used to call them contingencies. Now they call them growth areas. They give you assignments. You need to talk with this person. They determined that he had a problem with women in authority. And usually they say not at this time, go deal with, and which has happened to me. They've told me no, not at this time. Here, do these things, read these books, consult with this expert, yada, yada, yada. They didn't tell him not at this time. They told him, not at all, you're done here. You are not going to be a Methodist pastor. If you want to, you got to go to the back of the line, start all the way over again. Jeez. And again, I've known this guy for a long time. I could be wrong, but in my best assessment, he has never had a problem at all with women in authority. He's had a problem with, very similar to me actually, a problem with unfairness and unreasonableness, and that can get the better of him, and I've certainly seen that happen. And I've fallen victim to that in my own life also. But this idea that to me, it was very absurd. And so he was commiserating with a bunch of us, people who knew him, people who were kind of in on the process, who understood what was going on. He was commiserating. And sure enough, somebody around the table said, everything happens for a reason. And it was by far the least helpful thing that was said the entire time. And so there is this technically everything happens for a reason, but sometimes the reason is because you're profoundly misunderstood and other people are judging you inappropriately, or, what people mean when they say it is, don't feel bad, because this is actually a good thing.
Right.
And that's the real heart of what I want to talk about. Because there's nothing inherently wrong with the idea, literally, of everything happens for a reason. It's the intention behind when people use it. What they use it for is to say, stop feeling that way. This bad thing is actually good. And so just right now, I just want to pause and say, has anyone ever said anything like that to you? And does that line up? Like, can you identify with, and like, I invite anybody who's watching to literally like stop and think about any time when they said that and ask, what is the real intention behind what's being said? My strong suspicion is it will always come down to, don't feel that way.
Stemming from because I don't want to deal with it?
Well, I think usually, I don't want to blanket statement it, but I think usually it comes down to, the person who's saying it is wildly uncomfortable. They don't know how to fix the problem, and it hurts, or it's anxious, or it's nerve-wracking or whatever to sit in the problem that's unsolvable with someone. And so they're not actually trying, but like they've learned, well, just don't feel your feelings. And so they offer as a solution, well, just don't feel your feelings.
Right.
And it almost always, it doesn't always go wrong. Some people really like for people to tell them not to feel their feelings. My argument would be that that's actually really unhelpful and unhealthy. Even if you want it, it's not a good way to be.
I can't think of any like significant examples of when that's been said to me recently, because it hasn't been. But when it has been said to me, I have, as you were talking, I've noticed that I don't really hear that phrase from people outside the church, at least in my own context. I'm mostly, anytime I've heard, oh, well, it's all fine. Everything happens for a reason. It'll get better. It's been within the context of a church or a Bible study or a more religious setting. Now, I'm not saying like it's not possible that that is said outside of that. I just don't recall a time in my own personal experience.
Yeah, I would say also, so that brings up another kind of like unsaid subconscious layer to it, which is the other implication of it is that God is doing this to you.
Yes.
And that's the other implication when it's spoken in a theological context.
Right.
So like there's the broader, because I have heard people who are not particularly churchy or whatever say everything happens for a reason. And what they're saying is don't feel that way. When churchy people say it, they're almost always, at least as best as I can tell, implying God is doing this to you. Mm-hmm. Don't think this is bad because God is doing this. I just realized one of the things is, oh man, sorry, it's blinking, and that's going to drive people nuts. It's going to drive me nuts. Oh no! Oh god! I'm going to have to do like a disclaimer at the beginning of this. I promise it doesn't go on the whole time.
The phrase also has a gaudy smell on it too, and the gaudy smell is usually never God. It's always that self-righteous.
Yeah.
I'm better than you, so let me snip this out for you because I've been through this before. And
see, that's interesting
You're
too.
the failure here, and I'm not.
Because when you said gaudy, I didn't originally think like gaudy. I thought like big,
gaudy.
ritzy, blitzy, which I also feel like is similar, like in that same vein, that self-righteous, that I'm better than you, I don't want to touch this kind of mentality as well.
So let me bring a little bit of scripture into this because it's helpful to understand, at least in part, where this stuff comes from. And it boils down to like an ancient kind of split in Christianity. The Calvinists versus the Arminians. This guy Calvin and this guy Arminius. These two theologians who had wildly different interpretations of how God is and how God operates. And so what I want to do is I want to look at Exodus, and this is just one example of where the split in that theology comes from. So in the story of Exodus, just for those who are unfamiliar, the story of Exodus is about, at least in the beginning, is about the Israelite people being enslaved in Egypt. They have no power, and they're in the most powerful nation in the world at the time. And they are slaves. They are just the lowest of the low. And Moses receives a message from God through this vision at a burning bush that he's going to go into Pharaoh, he's the emperor, king, God-man, who rules this whole country, and tell him to let the Israelites go. That God on high has heard the cry of his people, and it is your job to like bow and be subservient to this God who is higher than anything, and to be obedient to this God's wishes, which is let these people go. Your whole economy, your whole it's a pretty drastic, like amazing thing that happened, as best we can tell in history. This happened. Like at some point, the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, and they actually just marched out. Like, oh, you got something to say about it, Jonah? I think he just maybe swallowed a bug or something. So in the story of Exodus, this happened. The mechanism by which this happens is a total of 10 different plagues that God visits upon Egypt. And so the rhythm of the story goes, Moses goes to Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh hardens his heart, and God sends a plague. And then and like this rhythm. So like God sends a plague, and then at the end of every plague, this phrase, like Pharaoh hardens his heart. He hardens his heart remained hardened. And this goes on for the first 5 plagues. And this is the text from the 6th plague, which is in chapter 9, and it's verse 12. And the 6th plague is boils, just if you're interested. So Moses says it again, visits this 6th plague of boils. 6 is the halfway point. So we've had 5 out of 10, and now this is number 6. And now the phrase changes. Chapter 10, verse 12. But Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not listen to them, just as Yahweh had spoken to Moses. From here on out, the language becomes much more direct in this rhythm that God is hardening Pharaoh's heart. And it brings up this very scary question in theology about free will and about causation. Is God in complete control, and everything that happens to you is a direct result of God's will? Or is there actual freedom within the boundaries of God's creation where God is not causing everything? And this text in particular is simply one example. There are lots of other ones, but one example where the writer is very direct, like God chooses for Pharaoh that Pharaoh is going to make the wrong choice, which is very interesting. So first of all, what do you make of the whole, and this is a big bailiwick, but what do you make of the whole free will predestination thing?
Yes.
How so?
I'm supposed to say no, but yes.
How so?
They're both yes, because sure. That's my funniest.
Can you have freedom if God is choosing how you choose?
It depends on its perspective. That's why I say yes.
Well,
Perspective is, are you free in a cage? Yeah. Well, if the cage is big enough that you feel like you have personal freedom because you can go anywhere you'd like inside the cage that you don't know, the Truman Show.
Well, that's just scales of freedom.
Correct.
Like spectrum. So are you saying, well, like, of course, nobody's going to say there's no such thing as boundaries. Like, nobody can fly by just flapping their arms.
Right.
Like, that in and of itself is a boundary. That's a cage.
Yeah.
You know, we die one day. That's a boundary. Mm-hmm. Like, there are laws of physics that we are bound by. So, sure, there's a cage that is creation that, you know, we can't just like go back in time. Right. You know, there are lots of boundaries that are physical, but that's not the heart of the question. The heart of the question is, does human choice within that context really exist, or are you simply a product of you were made this way, God made the world this way, God predestined you to be this way, even though you think you chose to come over here and be a part of this podcast or this live show today, you didn't choose that. That was always going to happen because those two truths are mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Like when you really get down to brass tacks, it comes like either the sky is up or it's down. And it can't be, well, that's a bad example because it is both. That's a bad example because it is both. There is a sky below us because we live on a globe.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like either
they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah, those two things can't quite be true without some serious heavy lifting and explanation at least.
Well, some symbolism in the Garden of Eden story was two trees. And that, I mean, you can derive it how you want, but one tree was finding out that there's a choice
knowledge
here.
Of good and evil.
The knowledge of you can go this way or that way, or come back and stay on this tree, be naive.
The tree of life.
The tree of life, which is let someone kind of choose it for you and let life live. So the answer is yes, to be funny, but from a genuine part of me, it's only free will.
Yeah.
Or we'd all be wearing the same color shirt right now and doing the same thing. And
all right, before I get into my stuff, what do you think, Courtney?
Yeah, I mean, I looking at my own life and my own choices that I've made, I would like to think that I had free will making those choices, and being that I've seen kind of the consequences and the upsides of both, depending on what I was doing and why I was doing it. I definitely think that a lot of the choices that I made and a lot of the things that have happened in my life are because I chose for them to go that way or didn't, or it was out of my control or whatever. But I don't think God's playing puppeteer and controlling every move I make.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're lining up right. You're good job at being good Methodists. Because the Methodist Protestant faith is Arminian. It's that we follow the theology of Arminius. And like one of the things he pointed out about Calvinist theology is, or at least his take on it was, okay, if God makes every choice, then God is the master of evil. Mm-hmm. Like then God is truly an evil, then all the evil in the world have been the direct result of God choosing to do evil things to people. And I don't want to horrify people with, I mean, there are historical things that if I wake up in the middle of the night, I have to prevent my mind from thinking about, because they horrify me that these things happened to real people. And let's face it, some of that stuff's going on today. So basically for me, the way I come down on it is, given the choice between the two, neither of them, like the existence of evil is a real theological problem. Let's just not pussyfoot around that. I don't have that worked out entirely, and I'm a preacher. Like I get paid to believe in God, and I'm still kind of like, I'm not sure about this stuff.
Right.
So let's not shy away from that. That is real. However, given the two choices, which seem to be the only ones that are really available, that either God is absolutely mandating everything, or that God has foreknowledge of all possibilities, but it is literally imbuing consciousness with a power to choose, and that the heinousness in life is directly related to that empowerment of choice, that when people inflict pain and horror on each other, that it is not God doing it, but it is a result of God empowering people to choose that. Like, given the choice between those two, I'll take the latter any day.
Yeah.
Like that is the only way that I can reconcile my loving, gracious experiences with God and the idea that there is evil in the world still, And so, all that to say, I think this is the fundamental problem with everything happens for a reason. It's because what someone is essentially saying is God caused this. And let's face it, there are things in our lives that are not like, oh, this is a good hurdle to overcome. There are some things in our lives that are traumatic and that hold us back.
I think most of those, too, ironically, are the hurdles to jump. which are, it's always funny to hear the story 20 years later of, man, we went through this and it was just insane and crazy, and you could laugh and whatever 20 years later.
Yeah.
But during that time of, oh my God, I'm going through a divorce right now. Oh my God, this is happening right. I can't deal with this right now. Everything happened for a reason, buddy. 20 years from now, you'll laugh at it. Well, right now, I'm
That's
shitting
not
my
what
pants.
I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
This is not fun right now.
Yeah.
This is not. Also, don't shut up.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. Yeah.
So what do you think it is about? Because I want to talk about the opposite end of it too. But before we get into that, because there's also something else going on the other end. But before we get into that, what do you think it is about when people bring this up? Like, what do you think it is that's so kind of like
Appealing?
I was going to say the opposite. That's so just like irritating or hurtful, because that's
So
been
when
my
you're on
experience.
the receiving end of
Yeah,
it. Okay, I thought you were
most
talking about-
people. I mean, we can kind of talk about either one. I think I know what's appealing, and that's kind of the next piece of the conversation that I want to have.
That's
but
creepy.
what is it that's so detrimental about that in the moment?
So I think for me personally, as an Enneagram 2, I'm wearing my Enneagram shirt, so we have to talk Enneagram, so sorry. One of my big hurdles that I personally have worked very hard to overcome is this idea that having needs and wants is okay, and identifying and acknowledging those really does matter. And if I don't acknowledge those and I end up choosing to minimize myself, then I'm actually making myself less than, making myself feel rejected, making myself feel not good enough.
And these are all kind of the dark sides of
Yes,
a 2.
of a type 2. Yeah. So for me, when someone says, oh, it's fine, everything happens for a reason, that church wasn't a great fit, but maybe the next one will. It's someone else kind of minimizing me before I can minimize myself. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like an active process for me to actively decide I'm going to listen to myself and sit in these feelings and allow myself to feel how I feel and work through them.
That's already hard enough work.
It's
for
hard,
you.
and it's an active choice that I have to sit and make. So when somebody else disregards it, minimizes it, kind of tries to put a positive spin on it, it doesn't feel helpful. It feels like you're telling me it doesn't matter. The bad things you're feeling don't matter. It'll all be fine. You'll get through it, but you don't have to think about them right now because they don't matter. And for me, that's kind of triggering because I've actively worked to show myself that I do matter and that my feelings do matter and my voice matters. So that's kind of been
it's kind of like kicking you in your soft spot.
Yeah.
Or just while you're down too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's almost always while you're down in a bad
Which I
position.
think it's touching on that next thing we're going to talk about. But to hint at it, it's that feeling of up versus down, and the up gets to kick the down while you're there. So when you're in fetal position, or I need to help myself here and I'm in survivor mode and I don't need anyone else to tell me what to do, or I'm going to lash out, that's when you don't need anybody telling you, hey, this is going to be better. Even if it's, lighthearted.
Even if it happens to be true.
Yeah.
Not that everything happens for a reason. Again, I think the intention when people say it, and also I should say, because I don't want anyone to feel like shit if you've ever said it.
I definitely said it.
Yeah, I've said it. It happens. It comes out, your feelings get the better of you, and then you end up just kind of grasping at whatever loose straws you can find, or you just don't know any better because no one's ever told you. Because you
This
never
is
even.
a phrase that's thrown around everywhere all the time, particularly on social media and Instagram and Facebook. And I don't think people realize that the harm that it actually causes. I don't think people consciously think about how it could be.
Well, and because some people when they're down and other people say it, receive it positively. Mm-hmm. And
true.
More power to you. I'm not here to tell you how to make your choices, but I do believe that is ultimately unhealthy and unhelpful, and I want to make a case for it.
Yeah, I mean, I lived into that everything happens for a reason kind of mindset for a long time. Like, that was a coping mechanism of mine when my parents were getting divorced. Like, convincing myself that it was all going to be okay and my relationship with my dad was going the way it was going because it happens for a reason. And it ended up, like, causing me more hurt and more pain down the line because I realized, oh, shit, like, while it was helpful in the moment of trauma, now I have to unpack all of this and realize that me thinking that way and me avoiding those feelings is what's leading me to feeling worthless, not good enough, unworthy. Worth is a big one for me.
Okay, so all right, let's get into, this is the next thing I want to talk about. Here's the other side of it. So there's the one side of it when things that are truly out of our control happen. When things, like, I often think about when there was a pastoral change at the church I was working for, and that person who came in just straight up did not treat me right or fairly. It was an unethical, unreasonable thing, and it was a little bit out of my control. I don't need someone saying in those moments everything happens for a reason, because my thing back to them would be like, oh, God's doing this to me. God wants me to what gives you the right to, like, no, I'm pissed and I should be pissed. This is unjust and unethical and unright, and I'm sad because I'm losing my home, like the place that I helped build and I love. Like, I'm like, no, I need to be sad. I need to be angry. I need to be afraid. I need these things. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's the other side of it. So I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast who had Mark Normand, who's a stand-up comic.
One of my favorites.
But yeah, he's a great comic. And he was talking about there are some comics who they go up, they have a bad set, they bomb, and and Mark Normand was telling his own story. And he goes into the toilet and he's there with his pants down, feeling vulnerable and like crying because he had a bad set and he feels terrible. And he was telling the story about these two guys who came in and he was like, hey, how about that opener? And like, yeah, the opener was great. Yeah, oh, and then the headliner was amazing. Yeah, the headliner was amazing. And yeah, what do you think about the middle guy? And Mark Normand's the middle guy who's literally in the stall with his pants around his ankles. What do you think about the middle guy? And he yells out, I don't know, I think it was pretty good. You know? And they're like, nah, he sucked. He's just like crying with his pants down in the most vulnerable position, ashamed of himself. And then there are these other comics who they bomb, it goes terrible, and then they come off the stage and they're like, hey, so what are we doing tonight, guys? You're like, what are you doing? You sucked. Like, you shouldn't feel good. You shouldn't feel good right now. And then that got me thinking about, like, excuse me, I'm burping a little bit. Excuse me. They got me thinking about, and I was one of these guys, but guys who are like, hey, so you want to go out for a cup of coffee? And no thanks. And then they were like, what's wrong with this world? Why doesn't everything work out? You know, it's like, I don't know, maybe take a look this way. Yeah. Like, maybe there's something going on with you that no woman wants to go out with you.
Right.
You know, or why can't I get a job? It's like, well, have you considered the possibility that you haven't bothered to educate yourself enough, or you're not applying for the right jobs, or you have no experience, or and there are, now I don't want to take away, especially because like the job thing in this particular context is like a nightmare. So like there are certainly mitigating circumstances out there, and like it's not an either or, there's a spectrum here going on. But like the other side of it is, we need to feel bad sometimes.
Right.
Because feeling bad, like when you don't allow it to happen, you are robbing yourself of a teaching, healing, life-giving experience. And this is the counterintuitive nature of the gospel. The Christ story is ultimately about death and resurrection. And if you don't have the death, you can't have the resurrection. That's just the way it is. If every time a woman rejects you, you're like, she's probably gay. Like, if that's your go-to every time, well then, like, you are destined to live a life of loneliness. And you deserve it. Like, that is, you have earned it, you know? But if you will die the death of, I think I'm unattractive. Like, there's a pattern going on that every single woman that I approach is not attracted to me, or whatever, you know, like fill in your sexual preference, fill in, like every partner that I seek is unattracted to me. Well, now you got the beginnings of healing taking place. Like, and for me, it was, I had to look at, because I was never really like a terribly unattractive person. What I was afraid of commitment and like afraid of liking what I liked. And so I always chose potential partners based on the fact that I knew they would reject me. This is all subconscious, but it's like I was afraid to be intimate, and so I would choose the unavailable all the time, like constantly. And so it wasn't that I was like this horrible, terrible person, but I had to die the death of like, hey, once is an incident, twice, coincidence, 3 times, well, we're getting into pattern territory here. like there's something going on here, and I'm the common denominator. And like, if I'm not willing to feel the pain of that and really acknowledge like there's something going on inside of me that is malfunctioning, that is hurtful, that is desperate, that is clingy, that is whatever, like, because until I'm ready to admit that about myself and like feel awful about it also, by the way, then I am constantly avoiding the learning, growing, resurrection experience. And like, so that's the other thing that this, like, everything happens for a reason, that's the other subtle dark side of this. Is that because the ultimate goal of this phrase is, hey, don't feel that way. It's like, no. You need to feel that way.
Right.
like you just lost something incredibly important to you, and not feeling that way would be detrimental to your whole psyche and identity. Or the opposite. Like, no, you're consistently fucking this up.
Right.
You need to feel the pinch of like, God, I'm consistently fucking this up. Like, I need to do better. How do I do better? I need to ask for help. I need to find a better way. I need to look inside of myself. I need to let go of these other priorities. Or I need to give up the ghost and acknowledge that maybe this just isn't my path and there's another path out there for it. Like those are all hard kind of acts of death.
The other avenue that this phrase comes up that I think we need to talk about, because I don't feel like we've actually touched on it very much, is the other place I've heard it, aside from just in church context, is when loved ones get like sick or die or come down with like something that you're not in
tragedy.
control. Right.
Like serious tragedy.
I hear it a lot.
Well, I think the same thing is happening there. Like, it's when, and so I was a chaplain, Tampa General Hospital. For all those out there, chaplaincy was, though it was a small part of my life, I was only a chaplain for a year, it was a definitive life-changing experience. And I still to this day, in fact, I have a peer advisory group meeting coming up. Like, I sit on the peer advisory group of Tampa General Hospital's chaplaincy program because I so hardcore believe in it. It'll be a connection for the rest of my life. That's how much that 1 year meant to me. If I learned nothing else, I learned this. When tragedy strikes and somebody's ill or injured or dying or dead, you should feel bad. And when you don't feel bad, you're damaging your own self. Not to get, certainly there are family members who die who you're just not that close to and it's not that big of a deal. Like, that, fair enough. It's like, well, we talked a few times and sad to see him go, but, not to saying you need to, throw yourself on the ground and kick your feet and bury yourself in ashes every time something happens. But when someone really close to you and important to you goes through something tragic, or you lose someone that's really close to you, and you are like just trying not to feel bad, that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it. When someone that you loved leaves for one reason or another, whether it's divorce because they cheated on you, or whether it's literally through like a sudden death that just like one day they're here and one day they're not, or whether it's through like that in-between time where it's like they're still here, but they're not here anymore. Like I've seen, because my floor was the neuro ICU, and that was a lot of in-between cases where it's like, well, their body's here, but they're not here. Like I've lost them. And that was a lot of the work that I do with families on that floor, and nurses on that floor even. It's like, it's weird to take care of a body without like a soul, without the feeling of there's like a soul here, you know? Like it's a weird thing. Like, yeah, this is sad and tragic, and it should feel that way. That's a good thing. You are feeling sad about the sad things that exist in this world. Let's do it. Let's join in the commiseration. Let's find healthy, productive ways to like grieve and celebrate what was and acknowledge what now is or is gone. You know, like that. We need those things. We need to feel bad. There's like a few other species on the planet that bury their dead. Like, why do we bury our dead? Because we know the implications of what happens with death and decay, but also because we need the ritual. Mm-hmm. We need the ritual of saying goodbye. Like our consciousness is far too complicated. Like if one of us dies, Jonah is going to be sad, but he's not going to do any rituals or anything. It just doesn't work that way. He's just going to keep eating and drinking water and pooping and peeing until he dies, you know? But if he dies, I'm going to need to do something. Like, I'm going to need to bury his ashes or something, like to say goodbye to him, because like the idea of consciousness and just the reality of the human soul, like, it requires more. It just does. And so when we don't allow ourselves to feel that way, and when we deny the negative spaces that are a part of life, that are a natural, healthy part of life, we're robbing ourselves of something, and we're doing damage to our souls, I think.
It's curious. It's like an excuse for absence or excuse for avoidance of life. Almost, it's almost like an emotional death.
Well, like you're a part of life, like, yeah. And like that's kind of the fantasy, right? I mean, like I get caught up in. So I watch these like yacht video tours. I love to watch yacht tours. I do. There's this channel called Aquaholic, which is great. It's this British guy who's, first of all, just kind of like funny and British and charming, and like, oh, here we go. What you see behind me is a Princess 95.
Chip.
Yeah, chip. Oh, yeah, and you know. And like, but like, part of that is scratching an itch in me with like, oh, sorry, I thought that was on silent. Is scratching an itch in me, like, can you imagine living a life where you could just go anywhere in comfort and not have to worry about feeling bad ever again? You know, like that. And so like, and that's a human impulse. We think that life would be better if we just never felt bad ever again. But I mean, we're coming up on the myth of the vampire.
Yeah. Oh, or what happens when the dog finally catches the mailman? Like they don't know what to do.
What's the Joker line?
Yeah, that was
I'm just a dog chasing cars.
I don't know what to do when I catch one.
I wouldn't know what to do if I caught one. Yeah. There's something about this like empty husk of a. I mean, almost every monster myth story is somehow connected to this desire, this false belief inside of us that if we could just kind of never feel anxious or sad or bad again, then we'd have this perfect life. And it's like, no,
you wouldn't have
everything that we know, it proves the exact opposite.
You wouldn't have any life.
Yeah, we need struggle, we need grief, we need sadness, we need the rain to appreciate the sun. It's just the way we're hardwired. Like, it may not be fair, and maybe even that's something we have to grieve and just acknowledge. But like, without fear, there can't, like, think about like, have you ever been cliff diving? Have you ever like?
Not yet.
No.
Well, like I've not necessarily cliff diving, but just like in, going to like natural springs and stuff, like jumping off. If you're not scared before you do it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
We've been playing Phasmophobia. I don't know why, but it just doesn't scare me. And so the game, it scares everybody else. It doesn't scare me, but the game is boring to me because it doesn't scare me. It just doesn't scratch my particular, like, you have to be scared for that to be good, I think about theater. Like, I love theater. And that feeling before I go on stage, if you're not nervous or at least nervy, like, it's not fun then. It's not good. Like, every time I preached in public, I at least had some kind of a ball, something. And like there's something about that makes the other thing really great. Like, and that's the way we're hardwired, man. We can't. So I think that's the real true damage of everything happens for a reason. It's not necessarily that everything happens for a reason, because of course it does. It's the implication that the reason is because it's Jesus. And you shouldn't feel bad because Jesus did it to you. And Jesus only does good things. So don't feel bad. And it's like,
Yikes.
well, there's just a bunch of things wrong with that. One, Jesus didn't do it. And two, you should feel bad. There's plenty of times when it's completely called for to feel bad. And if we don't allow ourselves to do that, then we turn into vampires. Like, we turn into just these soulless husks that can't taste food or appreciate love. And we just live forever in numbness. Like, nobody wants that.
Not a life I want to live.
Yeah, nobody wants that. Like, it's the dying that makes life good. Like, it's hard to say, but it really is, It's the potential for danger that makes the relief and the fun of, like, it worked,
Yeah.
It's just the kind of the way it is. Yeah. All right. I feel like we're probably towards the end, right? Anything else for the good of the order?
No.
No good.
All righty. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.